What is up, guys? This podcast is me talking and explaining the mentality of trading. I will explain the feelings that you have and what to do when they hit, when to sell and what you should never do in trading. I also talk about the great sales that I have made in particular games, and of course some stuff that still has not been sellable. So if you are into trading in any game, this is a podcast for you, and it just might give you that push to start your own trading. Have you ever thought about how you can make money on market in games? Or do you wonder why some of the richest players does market? Or just how profitable market and trading is in games that allow that kind of gaming? Well, I know a lot about that, mostly because that is my go-to. When I start games, I tend to play for a long time, and this video will help you understand what all that means, how to do it yourself, or perhaps if you already do it, maybe catch a few tips that you might have missed. I didn't really know how to start this podcast thing, so I wrote myself some questions that I will answer throughout this solo podcast. But generally, I will just discuss about the stuff that comes to mind, though the questions that I made will be answered as I see them fit. I will refer a lot to EVE Online games or EVE Echoes, maybe World of Warcraft, but this podcast will be valuable to anyone in any game that has an open trade and of course wishes to do trading, instead of always be the player who farm every day for your wealth. Now, the reason why market or trading in games works is just like real life. A marketeer or a trader in games usually have the job to supply the items that others want, and of course at the time that they need it. And in this job, you might think that you're just wasting time by not doing the other stuff that players do to make money. But what you actually do is you taking part in some of that money that they make, because they want their items quick to keep making money or making even more money than they did before. So you get paid from them, and sometimes a lot more than what the items normally is worth. And that is just because you had the items when they needed it. Or perhaps you're the one that have it when there's no one else to buy. So this is one thing why trading is valuable. You can provide what others can't, or you can provide at a steady rate. So you kinda become a solution for people's issues. So to start trading, the biggest question has to be, what wealth do you got that you can use? And also, what wealth do you need on a weekly or monthly basis to play the game? What can you afford to lock away in assets that others might need? One example is World of Warcraft. Early on in World of Warcraft, I started to mine. Now this gave me a steady income of value that I sold on the market. Sometimes the market was good and the ore that I collected was worth quite a lot. Other times they were not worth as much. In World of Warcraft, you could also find jewels. One of those were Arcanites. They were rare, but not too rare. And they, of course, sold for a lot more. What I noticed was that we always needed those jewels to make potions every time we was about to do a raid. And the stones always got sold a lot then. So every Wednesday, when the raid was reset, the prices went up almost 50 to 100%. This was one of my first understanding of trades. So my goal was of course to buy all the Arcanite a few days before. And then I sold them for a lot more on Wednesday. Now the wealth in that game was based on gold. And as I want to point out, it is important to keep some gold when investing in stuff. Because without the gold in that game you could not repair, or you could not buy your own potions, you see. So we the players have an upkeep, a wealth that we need every week or every month or every day to not get stuck. For example, in EVE Echoes, that's a mobile game that I play, it's similar to EVE Online. I need about 5 to 10 billion ISK every month. ISK is the equivalent of gold, and that's about 1 to 2.5 billion ISK every week. This I need to pay for my Omega. And the Omega is just a name for full access within the game. You see, the game is free to play, but you can with in-game money pay that fee instead of using real cash. Then you can play for free, just like World of Warcraft. So anyway, that is the money that I need every month in liquid assets, or money, or as that is called, ISK. So depending on the game that you play, you might need more or less, but the idea is the same. Another question you might ask is, but what can I sell or what can I trade? And to that I say, there might be a few items that is hard to sell within any game. Perhaps very unused items, or items that is not that good, or items that players easily can get themselves. Even very useful items can be hard to sell, and that is perhaps because there's an abundance of them. But generally, if stuff is tradable, they will eventually sell. This is also something that you will notice as you look at prices day in and day out in your game. It's always different in every game, so it's impossible to give you an exact advice on what to buy. But usually, it's easy to find the stuff that seems hard to sell, and then you can focus on other stuff. Perhaps some rare stuff that is not as common. And when you now have found the stuff that you feel would be good to trade with, it is always a question: how much can you invest on those items? Perhaps you can invest in one or two, or maybe everything. But perhaps you start with one or two, just to get some stuff rolling. But in the end, if those items rise in value, you will wish that you bought more. But that is if they blow up in price. Because we never know when or if they do. Now there are some big situations that can happen, and that is, for example, if the game gets an update that kinda twisting stuff around. Maybe they change the values, or if they within the game remove earlier stuff. It could be that there is a big war going on in the game that uses materials, or maybe stuff get nerfed or buffed. Then of course the prices shifts again. But either way, before this happens, how much percent of your total value should you invest? I invest today in the EVE Echoes game about 99% of my value in items and in ships and stuff, because I only need like 1% of my wealth to support my gameplay. As I say, it's important to not invest yourself dry, because then you can't do the things you wanna do. Because if you tie up all the money you have, that could make the game less fun. But it is true that the more you can invest, the more profit, the faster you will gain the wealth, and if you have a big wealth, then you can spare to use a lot of money. And that's what I can do within EVE Echoes, with the trillions of ISK that I have, which I would say is wealthy within the game. So doing market can make your invested money grow a lot more than what you can farm traditionally within most of the games. And that is of course if the investment is large enough and the prices doesn't crash. Now if you still don't know what to invest in, then I would say always start with items or stuff that you might use or need yourself. Now if the items do not sell as you're hoping, you can always use them yourself until they do. Also I wanna say, invest with the money that you don't need. And I said this twice now, and this was actually the third time, but it is important. It's kinda like only fly what you can afford to lose, as we say in EVE Online or EVE Echoes. This is because you need to be prepared that the money can be tied up for a long time. A lot longer than you anticipated. So if you now have items, when should you sell them? It's a good question that can be answered stupidly with when it's higher value, but generally there's a lot more to that. So to take EVE Echoes as an example again, the market in EVE Echoes has a tax, and the tax with perfect skills is 12%. This means basically that is the amount that you need to sell higher to even out. And we do not want that. A 1 million item needs to be sold at a 1.12 million to even out. But we want to have a profit, so 12% margin is clearly not enough. Be aware that the margin is different in different games. And depending on how the market fluctuating, the profit percentage is different. And within EVE Echoes, the market fluctuating a lot. So I would say you need to aim for at least 50% higher than the sell price, at the minimum. And this is of course depending on the item value. A big expensive carrier is hard to sell for double price, but if you have a more common shield booster, it's not. Biggest difference is that a shield booster is not that expensive and also a lot more players are buying it. And a big carrier might only be sold for maybe 30% profit, while that little booster that you have can be sold at perhaps 300%. This is stuff that comes naturally as you market yourself, but remember the game taxes and the game fees. Also, this is why Plex in EVE Echoes is hard to trade, because the growth of Plex is only 2% a week. So in theory, to make profit, it takes about 6 weeks to naturally gain that price expansion. Now, if your game has a tax, then that could be a reason why you see some trades, usually bigger ones, being traded through what we call mules. This is a way to remove tax during trade, and the bigger the value, the more inclined players are to use this method. What the seller then do is to join your corporation or your guild, and then you trade within there. In EVE Echoes you join their corporation and they make a corp job to pay the money. After that, the items will be given through a contract for free. And yes, there is some mutual trust that is needed. There are different ways in different games, so try to find what's right for yours. And they are of course called different things, but the idea is the same. Just to point it out there, if you need a middleman in EVE Echoes during big trades, then I could be of service. I hold the items in questions while the trade is in the works, and if the buyers don't pay, then the items will not be traded. And of course, if you pay, you can be sure to receive the item in question. But always take into consideration values, amount and fees when trading. And always and only sell when there's a profit. Now this last point here, only sell when there's a profit, can seem hard, and it might be. So hear me out. And this is just as important. You need to make sure that you never need something that you don't already have. Because when you buy something that you feel that you just need to have right now, you are actually playing on the opposite side of trading. Always sell when someone wants to buy, and never buy when you need the stuff. Anticipate what you need and get it when the prices are good, and use it when the time comes. Another good time to buy is when people direct wanna sell, then perhaps you can bargain for better prices. It's all saving money and making you able to have more to invest with next time. So you bought stuff, but there's a problem. What to do when the stuff that you bought is not selling? And I would say it's easy. You just wait and do other stuff. Whatever you do in your game, for example mining, PvE, or in the best of worlds if you ask me, you can PvP in the game. You can do anything, because this is your downtime. This is the time to enjoy the game. And the more items you have invested, the easier the money piles up. But also, the more time it takes for you to track it all. The less items that you have on the market, the more free time you have. But most likely the less money you make. And if you ain't doing market in games in any way, you most likely use your free time to grind money. And maybe that's not the most fun thing to do. Now of course market can be boring too, and especially when it's slow. And maybe you have too much free time in the game, and that's what I would say is when you play another game. But if you do marketing in your game, you know that you make money even when you play another game, which is kinda cool if you ask me. Your time will eventually come. Something that you bought might skyrocket, you just need to be there to see it and take advantage. Now there is hard to convince others how lucrative market and trading can be, and convince is the wrong word, but let me say what I've seen possible in terms of profit. And if you don't play EVE Echoes, this has again less meaning to you, but I will try to put in other stuff from other games. But anyway, I recently sold an item that I bought for 1.5 million and I sold it for 28. I bought some lasers for 400,000 that I sold for 19 million. And I've done many of those trades many times. In EVE Echoes, every blue items or C and B types is very volatile and goes up and down in price. They can for 1 week be extremely cheap, so I just buy them, and then when they skyrocket, I just multiply the profit like crazy. The same I do with rigs. Rigs can be easy 1000% profit. I buy them for 500,000 and I'll sell them for 5 million. I know I bought a ship called Navy Dominix for 3.2 billion and I sold it for 7.5 billion. And I'm sorry for the high numbers, but it's all about demand and timing. In World of Warcraft, for example, perhaps you played that game, I eventually started to trade pets. And I bought pets back in the days for, I don't know, 40k, and I sold them for 60. And it didn't take long until I had this trading card games pets that was worth the total gold cap, and I never farmed gold in World of Warcraft. And I traded my gold cap several times over. And this is of course some small stuff that I remember as I sit here now. I'm sure I'm missing a lot of fun stories right now, but let me know if you're interested in my WoW adventures or EVE Echoes adventures or EVE Online adventures. Tell me that in the comments below. But remember, there's always something that spikes in price. And even if I have some stuff that don't really have moved on the market, you know, stuff that I bought that I still haven't been able to sell, like some minerals that I bought that haven't done very well, even some construction materials that I bought. But generally, I think most of all the items is being sold. And of course, being patient is a big thing as a trader, because if it hasn't sold yet, then maybe next week. I guess this is what I wanted to say in this video, and I hope it helped players that want to make values in this way in the games that they play. And to everyone who thinks that me saying what you should buy would be easier, I want to say this. I have done that for EVE Echoes many times, but it's actually really not that good, because as soon as I say buy this, then the prices spikes and that video is no longer valid and most players will do wrong. So knowing what to buy is either through graphs in the game or through your own knowledge. Maybe someone else's knowledge if you ask them. But it is you that decide what to buy. It is your knowledge. And that was it. Leave a like before you go, subscribe to my channel if you want, maybe say hi when I do live streams. And if you do, then I will see you again.